Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. Trying something new for this week's show. I'm going live here on Facebook, and of course, we'll post some stuff on YouTube as well as iTunes and all that good stuff. A lot to catch up on here as I've been taking a little bit of a break here in between UFC events. I'm going to go back a little bit here, back to UFC Nashville. That was on the 22nd of April from Nashville, Tennessee at the Bridgestone Arena. 6 fights were shown on the main card, and starting with the first fight of the evening, Mike Perry against Jake Ellenberger in the welterweight division. A fight that I got this one wrong, I'll fully admit. I thought Jake Ellenberger and his wrestling ability would be able to get the job done against Mike Perry, who, while a very powerful individual, definitely more of a brawling type fighter. And I'm not really sure Jake Ellenberger's game plan that he was going through, but it was one of those things where he didn't do enough, in my opinion, to secure the victory. And that was pretty apparent considering that he got knocked out. But what I mean is he definitely should have pushed the wrestling game way more of an issue, tried to tire Mike Perry out. And I think after that initial opening where he did get the fight to the ground, I think he kind of maybe hung back and thought, no, maybe I can knock this guy out, or maybe he's stronger than I thought. Maybe a pride thing. I'm not really sure, but I think he got away from that after that initial success early in the first round. Kind of turned into a brawl. What happened is Jake Ellenberger got in close, and he caught a huge elbow from Mike Perry, and that's what Mike Perry can do. He has the power to put just about anybody away in this division if you let him get his hands on you. And that's what happened to Jake Ellenberger. And not taking anything away from Mike Perry, because he did win this fight, but still a guy that is very raw in his skill set. Powerful, yes. Talented, no doubt. But a guy that still has to develop a lot of tools in his game. I think if he can really work wrestling in reverse, I think that's going to help a long way. And also, take a little steam off in those in the first round, and not throw as hard to give him a little more stamina heading into rounds 2 and 3. Because as you get to the upper echelon of this division, you're not going to be putting guys away that quick. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have guys that are really quick and fast and are going to be able to move out of the way and see those big power punches coming. So if you are able to kind of throw a little bit of a lower intensity, not as heavy on power, a little faster, and then start mixing in those really heavy shots, I think he can be a little more successful. But again, still a talented guy, represents the state of Michigan, so it was good to see him win. And for Jake Ellenberger, a guy that, anytime he faces someone decent now these days, just doesn't seem like the same guy. And while, again, there's no shame in losing to Mike Perry, I think that was a little poor choice in tactics. I think he should have stayed on him a little more, but that's just me. All right, let's get to the next fight of the evening that was in UFC Nashville. That was in the lightweight division as Stevie Ray took on Joe Lauzon. And this was definitely kind of almost a tale of two fights. You saw a very dominant first round by Joe Lauzon. And even though I picked Stevie Ray, this is one of the areas that I thought if Joe Lauzon could get the fight to the ground, he would be able to have some success. And he did. He had a lot of success there in that first round and was able to really dominate that first round. Looking at the stats from Fight Metric, landed 3 takedowns and outstruck Stevie Ray 30-9. He was accredited with a submission attempt and passed the guard there 4 times. That was a pretty dominant round around. You could have made a case for a 10-8, and I think some judges did make it a 10-8. Round 2, Lauzon did land a takedown, but you start to saw Stevie Ray really show his boxing prowess. And it also seemed like Lauzon was kind of tired, like he put a lot of effort. A guy that I never really would consider a guy that has bad conditioning, and he seemed to kind of start to gas out a little bit, in my opinion, and Stevie Ray started to kind of take over. That round even pretty even, really, because like I said, Lazone dominated the first part of that round, but then Ray really took over with the striking, ended up outstriking Lazone 36-16 in that frame, and like I said, did get taken down, but was there for only about half the round. In round 3, Lazone did get one takedown in the round, but really overall wasn't able to do much with it. More on the feet, Stevie Ray really pressing, and by that time, Joe Lazone not only just looked like he didn't want to strike at all, it also looked like he didn't know how to strike, which is crazy for a guy that's been in the UFC for over 10 years now. He looked like a guy who's never done kickboxing before, and Stevie Ray really took advantage. I mean, through 152 strikes, landed 94 of them, outstruck him 94-19, really put a stamp on that third round, and to me, definitely secured the third round. Like I said, this was going to be close because the first round, you can make a case for a 10-8. However, they did know on the broadcast that this fight was under the old rules, which would mean that the 10-8 round isn't scored as heavily. However, even though they're not technically under the old rules, it does seem as though that had to play a little bit of a factor there in it as well. So that's a good thing, because I think you can easily make that case for a 10-8 round. So if you scored a 10-8, you kind of get there, and that's why we got to the majority decision with a judge scoring in a draw, the other two scoring in favor of Stevie Ray. And I thought the judges may give Joe Lazone the nod there, but he didn't. And good for Stevie Ray and good for me, because I picked that fight. So I really enjoyed that, and good win for Stevie Ray, the biggest win of his career, beating Joe Lazone. He had beat Ross Pearson not too long ago. Before that, this was his first fight not in the United Kingdom, so I think that was a really big deal for him, winning overseas and finally fighting over in the U.S., where now that he's starting to climb up the ratings, I believe this is either his 5th or 6th UFC victory. He's obviously going to be fighting on this side of the world a lot more, and so the fact he was able to do that and get a victory over a solid veteran like Joe Lazone is a really big deal. Obviously, it looks as though he's going to be fighting on the Scotland card coming up here in a few months. Obviously, being a Scotsman himself, that's going to be a big deal once again, fighting in his home country. So really excited for Stevie Ray coming up, because I think he could be a breakout star here in the lightweight division. John Dodson against Eddie Wineland. Kind of the fight I expected. John Dodson winning, but man, it was kind of brutal to watch. I mean, this was a lot of swinging and missing from Eddie Wineland, and just kind of subtle countering from John Dodson. I mean, through a 15-minute fight, Dodson landed 48 strikes of 103 thrown, and Eddie Wineland was only able to land 21 strikes out of 138. While Wineland has a lot of power, even if this fight was early on in Eddie Wineland's career, I don't know if he'd be able to catch up to a guy like John Dodson. He's just so super quick. He's just a hard guy to really hit with anything substantial. And Dodson, because he was so much shorter than Wineland, I think just realized, hey, if I can get him to swing and miss enough, I can just kind of hit a few on the outside and get the win. And that's really what happened. Because of that long reach, Dodson really didn't want to go inside too much because he knew he could get hit with some bombs. So he was very methodical in his striking, and it didn't really make for an exciting fight. I mean, the most strikes landed in any round was 18, which is, like the 5-minute round. So, well, 2 a minute would be 30. So that's, or not 2 a minute would be 30. 2 a minute would be 10. So little over 3 strikes landed a minute, which is not, for a smaller weight class like this where they can really put an output, is not that great. And yes, Dodson got the win, but I don't think it moves him up that high in the rankings. And this was not the greatest performance really by either, but at the end of the day, it is a win, and he came out relatively unscathed. So for John Dodson, I'm not really sure what's next for him, but he's definitely one of those guys that is a conundrum, and he is very difficult to solve. And Eddie Wineland found that out a couple weeks ago in Tennessee. Next fight of the evening, Ovens St. Preux against Marcos de Lima. I actually picked against St. Preux in this matchup, despite being the more well-known fighter, mainly because he hasn't been fighting good as of late. He had a bad performance in his last fight against, I believe that was Ozdemir, and then really, I didn't think he looked that great against Jimmy Manuwa, and then he had the fight against John Jones, which again took on short notice, and again he took on John Jones, so I don't hold that loss too much against him, but he had lost 3 in a row, which I don't believe he had ever lost that many fights in a row in his career. So definitely a guy that was kind of on a skid there, taking on a guy that is a very powerful guy in De Lima, and looking to kind of play spoiler and obviously have himself break into the top 15 of what is it right now, a very weak light heavyweight division. And Ovens once again fighting in his home state of Tennessee. Looked pretty good. The first round, De Lima definitely landed some shots, but the difference, Ovens with his athletic ability, and I think probably a little more well-rounded than De Lima, was able to get the fight to the ground and locked up another Von Flue choke, his second such choke inside the octagon. And after the fight, they were calling it the Von St. Preux choke. I mean, they could just call it Von Flue, Von Preux. I wouldn't say Von St. Preux, but anyway. So quite incredible that he was able to pull that choke off again, and that's just something. It's one of those chokes that kind of have to know. It has to be your thing. That's not a choke you just decide in the moment to go for. And obviously, St. Preux is a guy that really knows how to do that and really looks for that opportunity to land that type of choke. So it was awesome to see him come back and win there in Tennessee and win in that fashion. Was very emphatic. So definitely props to Ovens St. Preux for getting back there on the track. Next fight of the evening, I believe that was the home main event. That was between Al Iaquinta and Diego Sanchez. And what can you say? Al Iaquinta, he's the younger guy, even though he's been out for 2 years. Just proved that he's quicker, faster, a little bigger, a little stronger, and just was able to put it right to Diego before Diego could get any sort of rhythm. And at this stage in Diego's career, doesn't have the chin that he once did. Now going by Lionheart, this guy's proven that he really just can't take a punch the way he used to. And I really don't think he has that many fights left in his career. Al Iaquinta capitalized after the fight, had a lot of interesting comments about selling real estate, and he's the real president of the UFC, and I don't know. This guy's, part of me likes the attitude that he's kind of cocky, but part of me doesn't, because it's not doing him any favors moving up the rankings. And the fact he's basically kind of sit out for 2 years kind of because of his attitude, more or less. I think he may have had an injury in there, but it wasn't all injury related. So I'm not really sure kind of what's going on with this guy. I think, yeah, he's had some nice wins in the UFC, but I think he's talking a lot for a guy that, to me, doesn't have that many amazing victories in the UFC so far. I mean, sure, the win over Kevin Lee now looks like a big one, but again, when he beat Kevin Lee, that was Kevin Lee's first ever fight in the UFC. He beats an aging Diego Sanchez and has a close split decision win over Jorge Masvidal. Again, that Masvidal win looks a lot bigger now that Masvidal is possibly on the cusp of fighting for the welterweight title up a division, but let's look realistically, that was a very close fight, a fight that very easily could have went the other way and gave the win to Masvidal. So I think for Iaquinta, you got to beat somebody relevant right now, number one. And number two, there's already guys who have kind of... You're not going to out-talk the guy who's currently the kingpin of your division in Conor McGregor, and you're probably not going to even out-talk Nate Diaz. So for Al Iaquinta, I don't know. I don't know really what his strategy is or what he's doing, but maybe he thinks it's working. Maybe he thinks by alienating the UFC that's going to get him farther in the company, but I think that's not really how it works. So we'll see the plight here of Mr. Iaquinta. I actually wouldn't be surprised somehow. I don't know what his contract situation is, but I could very easily see the UFC, if they don't like these antics, cutting him and him going to Bellator. He might have a better shot of fighting for a Bellator championship. And I don't know. The way he was talking, it sounded like he had other things going on, that fighting was just something extra he does. Who knows? I don't know. But we'll see. It was an impressive performance, and I will give him that. Main event of the evening, Cub Swanson against Artem Lobov. Awesome fight, actually, believe it or not. I actually thought Artem actually won the first round, in my opinion. I thought did a really good job in that opening round. He actually outstruck Cub Swanson 33-25 and even took Cub down. But I think from that point on, again, one of the biggest disadvantages that Artem has is that his reach. He has one of the lowest reaches in the featherweight division, and that's always going to be difficult to overcome. Also, adding the fact that he fights with his hands pretty much at his waist. He does not really keep his hands up near his head at all. You kind of add those two factors in against a guy that is a very talented striker. It was going to be hard for Artem to really combat that, if he wasn't able to catch Cub with something in that first round, which, yeah, he hit him with quite a few shots, but nothing that really hurt Cub. And from that standpoint, Cub really figured out how to handle Artem Lobov and overall outstruck him 251-134. But what a battle. I mean, these two threw over 500 strikes, pretty close to 600 actually a little over 600 combined thrown strikes in this 25-minute fight. The highlight of the striking was when Cub Swanson outstruck Artem 63-24 in that third round, though Artem did land a takedown in that third round. And I think these rounds weren't sweeping, dominating rounds. Well, maybe two were by Cub, but it was actually a very competitive fight. And for a guy that is not ranked maybe 50th in the world against the guy that's ranked 4th in the world here at this weight class of 145 pounds, I thought Artem did way better than I expected. Now, that being said, he did lose this fight, and I probably thought it was 3-2 Cub, more likely, as most of the judges scored there, 4-1, but I think for really giving the guy no shot, thinking he was going to get smoked in maybe the first or second round, for him to go the 25 minutes and make it, I think, fairly competitive, I think says something that the guy definitely is a warrior. And while he's probably not going to ascend to the heights of his teammate Conor McGregor, he's definitely a guy that can make a fun and entertaining fight. And I definitely gained a lot of respect for Artem, because I'll admit I didn't have much going towards him heading into this matchup, even though he had a good run on The Ultimate Fighter, making it to the finale of that season of the show. But I definitely respect Artem Lobov in this fight. But if he really wants to move forward, he's going to have to not fight with his hands at his waist, because doing that against some of these guys in this division, what happened to him a couple weeks ago, that's what's going to continue to happen to him, especially against guys like Cub Swanson that are in the top 5 of the division. So that was UFC Nashville. Let's get to a couple other things I wanted to talk about before I get to UFC 211 this weekend from Dallas, Texas. And that is Glory 40, the kickboxing that happened a few weeks ago as well. Wanted to talk a little bit about that. Undercard was pretty solid. Saw some good performances by Cameo, Josh Johnson. I thought looked really good. The youngest fighter, I believe, on the Glory roster, in the fighter from China in Z, he won his Glory debut. I believe he's only like 19 years old. Also, former guest of the show, Richard Abraham, lost to Bates in the main event of the Super Fight Series. It just didn't seem like Abraham was really getting enough output out there, and I think that was the biggest reason why he wasn't able to bring the victory home there in Denmark. Getting to the main card that was shown on ESPN, and thank the Lord it was actually live on ESPN2, which I haven't seen any numbers, but I gotta believe the numbers did pretty well there on this Saturday afternoon that it was on, April 29th. Really good tournament in the middleweight division. Pereira and Belgari ended up making it to the finals, both pretty easily. Belgari, I thought, really took out Pertini very well, used his height well, really troubled him. And I think maybe had a knockdown or two in there as well. And Pereira he was all over Rama from the start. Rama never could really get his feet under him, and the Brazilian, to me, really kind of sailed in that one and poured it on, and then finally got that knockout there in the third. Co-main event, Larsson against Sitmonchai. Sitmonchai, I think, kind of held back a little bit. It seemed like he was kind of waiting for that counter, but then Larsson would just rack up 3, 5, 7 strikes kind of almost in a row, and then you would see Sitmonchai maybe land one or two. And I think the 3-minute rounds instead of the 5 minutes, and only having 3 rounds maybe instead of 5, Muay Thai has a little different kind of structure and stuff. I think he just kind of held back, and I think he is a talented individual. I mean, this dude's fought like 140 times in his career, but Larsson just super active, really kept it moving. Never left Sitmonchai with a really good standing target, and really never let him, land one of those big counters. He really stayed elusive, and this was a big win for Larsson, a guy that did have some, injury problems not too long ago, and has now come back. Starting with Glory 38 in Chicago, taking out Lucas Palauchi, now taking on Sitmonchai in back-to-back unanimous decisions. He's definitely a guy in the lightweight division, the Danish Destroyer, that I think could possibly be fighting for the title. I know Sidachai's, especially when Sidachai's pretty much taken out everybody that's kind of been towards the top here. Obviously, a trilogy fight with Robin van Roosmalen, I think, is imperative, but I think Nicholas Larsson is a guy that could be on a short list to fight Sidachai for the lightweight championship in the not-too-distant future. And then getting to the finals there of the middleweight tournament, Belgari against Pereira. I think Pereira maybe, just wasn't, maybe because he went for it in that third round against Rama, maybe just didn't have quite the energy, but it never really seemed like he could kind of get on a solid track against Belgari, who just seemed like the fresher fighter right from the get-go, and really just kept on coming, and Pereira tried to counter, but you could tell really by the second, and especially in that third round, that a lot of his shots were labored and telegraphed, kind of keeping his head high, and Belgari was really kind of able to put a lot of power punches. To Pereira's credit, he didn't go down. He took them all, but he was definitely eating a lot of shots, and a very impressive performance by Belgari. I think this fight against that caliber of opponent in the second round of a tournament for the man from Tunisia, maybe his best win to date. And this is the second time he was in the tournament, so I think he kind of figured it out, because he was very close to winning the first time he was a tournament in Glory 34, losing to the winner there, Israel Danisheh, who went on to fight Jason Wilness in a very close fight for the middleweight championship. I think that was late last year, early this year. I forget when those two fought. So Belgari's right there, and this time he breaks through, beating Alex Pereira, who has won a Glory tournament as well. A guy that kind of took some time away from Glory, but Belgari against Simon Marcus, who we'll get to here in just a minute, should be a fantastic fight, especially considering Simon Marcus is 6 foot and you have Belgari there at 6'5". That should be a very interesting matchup moving forward when those two fight each other later this year. And speaking of Simon Marcus, fighting Jason Wilness once again for the middleweight championship. And this is a fight that was super close. I mean, super close. And this is the third time they ever fought. He beat Jason Wilness at Glory 20 in Dubai. And then, of course, lost to Jason Wilness there at Glory 33. A fight where some crazy things happened. Obviously, Simon got really riled up, was kind of showing off a little bit too much, and ended up kind of being his downfall, getting knocked out there at Glory 33. They finally trilogy here at Glory 40, and man, just a super close fight. It was really the straight boxing combinations and the forward pressure of Jason Wilness against some really nasty body kicks by Simon Marcus, especially with that front left leg. you could see the marks that were developing on Jason Wilness' ribs and stomach as this fight progressed. Wilness just seemed to eat him, and I think that was really that was kind of how this fight played out. It was those kicks. Marcus would maybe dance around, throw through combinations, but Jason Wilness would just keep on coming forward. You use that high guard with the forward pressure, throwing those punches. Did mix in some nice low kicks as well. Man, I don't know. It was a really close fight. I actually thought Wilness was going to edge it out, kind of maybe get that championship advantage there in a close fight. But the judges' split decision went the way of Simon Marcus. And even though he has Belal Giri coming up next, I actually wouldn't be surprised if we see a fourth fight between Wilness and Simon Marcus, especially considering the middleweight division's a little shallow right now, and also considering how close that fight was. I think that's a fight that could happen, a possible fourth fight between these two. We shall see, but very close fight. Marcus, gets the win there, and I think Marcus learned a lot from that fight there, the second fight there against Jason Wilness, and you really didn't see Marcus really kind of do a lot of the showboating and emotional as we typically see him do in a fight. So it should be interesting with him moving forward against a very tall and big individual in Belal Giri, and I think that's going to make for a tremendous matchup whenever they meet, which I imagine would be later this year. All right, let's get to what the title of this video is. UFC 211 picks. Of course, I'm going to go over the 5 fights of the main card before giving my picks for said fights. Looking at the undercard, though, really quickly, a very stacked undercard for UFC 211, which again will take place in Dallas, Texas. Looking at the Fight Pass portion of the card, starting at 6:15. Jessica Aguilar, former World Series of Fighting champion, making only her second fight in the UFC. She lost her debut to Claudia Gadelha. That was quite a while ago. That was actually back in August of 2015, so it's been nearly 2 years since we've seen Jessica Aguilar step inside the octagon. That fight obviously did not go her way, as she really got dominated by Gadelha. Now taking on Courtney Casey, who is a friend of the show. She's been on a couple of times, but Courtney Casey's definitely, she's a spark plug. She's one of those girls that really sets a very high pace. It doesn't matter if it's on the feet or if it's the grappling. She really does come after you, and she kind of requires your A game to beat her. You have to be able to kind of weather that pace and be ready for a very high energy fight. And if you're not, she can overwhelm you with striking and grappling. So Jessica Aguilar is definitely going to be in for a scrap against Courtney Casey. You add in the fact that it's been nearly 2 years since Aguilar has last competed. Maybe a little bit of rest for the Mexican fighter against Courtney Casey, who since joining the UFC has been really active. I believe she joined in July of 2015, which was just right before Aguilar made her debut. So very similar time frame for these two ladies. The difference is Aguilar's fought once. Courtney Casey, this will now be her 6th fight in nearly 2 years, whereas Aguilar's fought once. And Courtney Casey has fought some very tough girls in that time frame. I mean, made her debut against Joanne Calderwood. She's also fought Sohee Ham, Christina Shanshu, Ryan DeMarcos, and Claudia Gadelha as well. So this is definitely, and obviously Courtney losing that fight to Claudia, which snapped a 2-fight winning streak that she had. So she wants to get that one back, and obviously taking on somebody in the top 15 like Aguilar, that would be a huge win, a huge boost to her confidence, and would be huge. And that's the highlighted fight on the prelims portion of the card. Also, looking at some of the other fights, Chase Sherman against Rashad Coulter. We also have Enrique Barzola against Gabriel Benitez. And we also have Gads Hudemir, if I probably said that wrong, Antigulov against Joachim Christensen will also be featured on the Fight Pass portion of the cards. Getting to the prelims shown on FX. I think they're showing baseball or basketball or something on FS1 or FS2, so it's been moved to FX for the even better prelims. That's going to start at 8 p.m. Eastern, starting off with Texas native, the Texecutioner himself, James Vick, against Marco Polos Reyes. That should be a highly entertaining fight. James Vick is definitely a guy always looking for the knockout. Should be an entertaining fight, again, fighting in his home country. We're also going to get Jared Gordon taking on Mikel Quinones. I said that correctly. That should be a very interesting fight as well. That's going to be, it looks, in the featherweight division. Also, Chaz Skelly, another Texas native, he's going to be taking on Jason Knight. Jason Knight, one of those guys that is always in an excellent scrap, has some good submission skills, some great stand-up, a guy that never quits. Chaz Skelly obviously has had some really good performances in the last few fights. Had that really quick submission at UFC Fight Night Austin. I think that was less than a year ago. It has some good wrestling too, so definitely good contrasting of styles, and really look forward to this scrap. Two of the younger guys here in the featherweight division. And the highlight prelim is going to be a matchup of two top 10 lightweights, as Dustin Poirier takes on former Bellator and UFC lightweight champion Eddie Alvarez. This should be a fantastic scrap. I think the really big difference in this fight is really seeing if Eddie Alvarez is going to push the wrestling portion of the game. Because I think at this division, the 155, Poirier just seems so light, so much quicker, that he doesn't have to cut out this weight, and obviously has been a lot more powerful, has seen a tremendous increase in the number of knockout finishes since moving up the 10 pounds from the featherweight division. And obviously for Eddie Alvarez, he's a guy, this is his first fight since losing the title and losing to Conor McGregor, a fight that obviously he did not have a great performance in. And will that performance kind of still be in the back of his head? You know, has he moved past that enough to take on a very talented guy in Dustin Poirier that you can't look past? And, you know, will we see, you know, a very confident Eddie Alvarez, or his confidence, has it been rattled? You know, and maybe we see a guy that just kind of tries to win instead of, or fighting not to lose instead of a guy fighting to win. I think that's a very big thing, is where his mindset is. And, you know, for Dustin Poirier, this is a very, very big fight for him. You know, even that he, you know, lost to Michael Johnson not too long ago, but was able to come back and have a very strong performance against Jim Miller earlier this year at UFC 208. So, you know, I would say the confidence factor may give a slight edge there to Dustin Poirier after beating such a long-time veteran like Jim Miller. Gives him a nice boost here against Eddie Alvarez and what would be the biggest win of Dustin's career to date. And if Dustin can get this win, it doesn't quite erase the loss to Michael Johnson, but it puts him right back in a very similar position that he was in September of last year. And that's just going to be a fantastic fight, scheduled for 3 rounds there, the highlight prelim of the FX portion of the card. Getting to the main card, however, going to be awesome. Despite losing Sergio Pettis against Henry Cejudo, still a very excellent 5-fight main card. Starting first with David Branch against Christoph Jaco. This is going to be in the middleweight division. David Branch making his return to the UFC. Formerly fought in the UFC quite a few years ago. After that, went on to fight for a couple organizations, including the World Series of Fighting, where he became a simultaneous champion. He was not only their middleweight champion, but he was also their light heavyweight champion. I think he defended both titles. I think the middleweight he won first. I think he defended 2 or 3 times, and then was able to defend the light heavy one, I think, at least once. So this is a guy that is a Gracie black belt, a guy that's very talented grappler, has developed some solid stand-up, but a guy that is definitely more known for his jiu-jitsu skills. 20-3 overall, with 7 of those wins coming by way of submission. And really, since getting cut from the UFC, which was in March of 2011 when he lost to Husamar Palares, he's gone on a pretty impressive streak. Like I said, bounced around with a couple of different organizations before fighting in World Series of Fighting, where he stayed from 2012 to now. And the only losses he had outside of the UFC was to Anthony Rumble Johnson, which is not a bad loss. That was actually in Titan FC. But since then, he has beaten some very good competitors like Dominic Steele, Justin Jacoby, Paulo Filo, Daniel Villafort, Jesse Taylor, Yushin Okami, Vinny Malhagles, and Clifford Starks, among some of the guys he has beat along the way. has not lost since November of 2012, and has rattled off, I think this is 10 consecutive victories. Let me count this up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, he has rattled off 10 consecutive victories. And his last few bouts obviously have been scheduled for 5 rounds, being a dual champion. Now 35 years old, like I said, a Renzo Gracie black belt. I still think he's a very formidable foe, taking on the very young and up-and-coming Krzysztof Jaco, who also has a very impressive record of 19-1. The man fighting out of Poland so far has been nothing short of fantastic, as he has won 6 of his 7 UFC bouts. The only loss coming to Magnus Sedenblad. That was all the way back in May of 2014. Since then, has rattled off 5 in a row. Like I said, has won 6 of 7. Beaten some tough guys like Tor Troen, Bradley Scott, Tamden McCrory, and probably no more impressive than his last victory in November of last year, taking out Thales Leites, which was a huge upset, beating the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. And so Jaco's a guy that, with that experience taking on a guy like Leites, he's not going to be afraid of the jiu-jitsu prowess of David Branch. And I think is a guy that's maybe going to be, he's listed, let's see what the matchup has him listed at. He's going to be same height at 6'1", and is actually going to have a little bit of a shorter reach overall, 81 inches for David Branch, 77. But I would say Jaco is probably a little more stronger of the two fighters, and obviously is a lot younger at 27 years old. So I think he's a little bit quicker than David Branch as well. And this is going to be a very interesting fight. I mean, Jaco proved a lot of people wrong, in his last effort against a very good jiu-jitsu guy in Thales Leites. So it should be interesting to see how he fares this time around against a very accomplished jiu-jitsu guy once again. So I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting fight. I'm looking forward to it, and we'll see what happens. But I think standing up though, Jaco is going to have a slight advantage there against David Branch, and I also think has a little more power. And if he's smart, I think that's where he should let the fight play out. But again, he wasn't afraid of facing Thales Leites, in the guard and in the grappling, was able to pass that test and win. Maybe that would give him I'll give him some confidence, whether that's good or not. It's good to have confidence, but good or not, actually him moving forward and trying to test out another good jiu-jitsu guy, again, may become too overconfident, and that could fall right into a guy like David Branch, who is a very good veteran. Another very good veteran, Frankie Edgar, the former UFC lightweight champion. He is set to battle one of the rising stars here in the UFC, in Yair Rodriguez, fighting out of Mexico. Should just be a fantastic fight, because you have, obviously, stylistically, just incredible striking from Yair Rodriguez. Very creative, puts a lot of output out there, very dangerous kicks, throws from a lot of different angles, and a guy that's proven that he can do this for 25 minutes. However, he's taking a guy that is a very strong wrestler, a guy that has a very workmanlike performance, very quick on his feet, even now, being a little older in his career, still a guy that's can be very quick and very hard to hit, as he's never been finished of his 5 professional losses, and definitely has a guy, I think, last time I checked, has the most octagon time in UFC history, or one of. So this is a guy that definitely can go the 15 minutes, can go the 25 minutes, probably even go from that. And along the way has trained under Renzo Gracie and Ricardo Almeida. I believe he is a black belt now, or if he's not, I mean, he's pretty darn close to that level of skill on the ground. You couple that in with his wrestling ability, he has definitely the skill set to beat a guy like Yair Rodriguez. But will he be able to catch Yair Rodriguez, who obviously is going to be a little bigger, a little stronger, and a little faster at this stage of his career than Frankie is? Obviously, Frankie is towards the end of his career, still definitely a very formidable foe, but he's really going to have his hands full with him. And if Frankie can get on the inside, make this an uglier fight, keep Yair's back up against the cage, make him work to exit positions, exit from the clinch, really work to get up, even if he's not landing a lot of damage. Just really do anything to make him carry his weight, to work hard to get out of certain situations. Work hard in those scrambles, really dig, which is what Frankie Edgar does. He can win this fight. But if he's just kind of just moving around, trying to strike from the outside, just kind of move inside out, really strike that way, I think he's going to find himself in a difficult time, because Yair is so long, so fast, and creative with his strikes. I think if he's just simply trying to move in and out to strike with Yair, I think he can get caught, and I think he can get finished. Even though he hasn't been finished, he's been hit hard in his career, and there's definitely times when you've seen Frankie Edgar on wobbly legs, and this is a type of matchup where Yair could possibly be the first one to finish him. But Yair's in for a tough test. He hasn't faced a grappler quite like this before, and many fighters have been stifled by the offensive wrestling of Frankie Edgar. And so will that happen once again, or will the young gun be able to get out of those positions long enough to land some of his incredible striking, especially, like I said, with his kicks? Moving on to the next fight of the evening, we go to the welterweight division as Demian Maia takes on Jorge Masvidal. Now, while Masvidal is going to be the better striker of the two, he's obviously going to be a little bit smaller, Maia being a former middleweight and Masvidal being a former lightweight, even though he's only 2 inches shorter than Demian Maia, and actually will have a longer reach, 74 inches to 72. A little bit of a strength advantage goes the way of the Brazilian, and obviously arguably the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt to ever compete inside the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And while Masvidal is a very good grappler of his own right, Demian Maia is just at another level, and right now he's fighting as good as he ever has in his career, including when he fought for the middleweight championship quite a number of years ago. Really, since losing to Jake Shields and Rory McDonald back-to-back again, the very close fight against Jake Shields, and then just didn't have it that night in February back in 2014 against Rory McDonald, has rattled off 6 consecutive victories, and has been able to finish 3 of them by submission. No more impressive than his last fight in August of last year, where he just simply took Carlos Condit down, swooped around, got the back, and choked out one of the best to ever compete in the welterweight division like he was nothing. And the way that fight went down, the way he has been fighting lately, it really is going to be hard. I mean, I usually go with the guy on the roll, and Masvidal is on a roll. I mean, knocked out Cowboy Cerrone, who had been on a roll, and really made Cowboy look bad. However, I'm just not. Demian Maia is such a buzzsaw and such a matchup nightmare. I'm not sure even a guy like Masvidal can take him out. The biggest thing Masvidal has going for him is his chin, and obviously does have more of a penchant for a knockout, and that could help him in this fight, where he should be the better striker. But he's got to be able to stop the takedown. If he can do that, he can get a victory. But so far, at least in the last 6 fights, no one's really been able to deny Demian Maia that. And good luck to Mr. Masvidal, because right now Maia is a guy on a mission for the welterweight championship. Getting to the co-main event of the evening, it's going to be in the women's strawweight division as the champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk takes on Jessica Andrade, and I think this will be Joanna's toughest fight to date. Andrade formerly fought in the UFC in the bantamweight division, then dropped down to the strawweight division in June of last year, and in less than a year, she has taken out 3 very tough girls in Jessica Penne, Joanne Calderwood, and Angela Hill, and has done so in very dominating fashion, knocking out Jessica Penne, then submitting Joanne Calderwood, and then just battering Angela Hill. And while that was a great fight, I mean, she put on an absolute clinic, throwing bomb after bomb, and credit to Angela Hill for not going down in a fight that she took on short notice. But man, Jessica Andrade showed that even in a longer fight, a fight that went 15 minutes, that power can still hold up, and still something to be seen in what ended up being fight of the night. But really great performance by her, and with that size, with that strength, with that power, she definitely poses a threat to the champion Joanna, who really has not been, other than her, I really think her first fight with Claudia, and obviously the first 2 rounds of the second fight against Claudia, has been flawless in her performances in the octagon. And in this fight, she really has to keep up what she's been doing to be successful. Punches and bunches, great countering, elusive movement, staying on the outside with kicks, and wrestling in reverse. If she really keeps up what she's been doing, I think she can beat Jessica Andrade. But if this fight gets in close at all, gets in the clinch, and obviously if Andrade is able to get the fight to the ground and be on top, Joanna can get in trouble. She's definitely not a world-class grappler, but definitely has good defensive grappling skills. But the power Andrade has, one punch. I mean, we saw her get clipped by Carolina in their last fight. So that's the first time we really saw Joanna really get hurt in a fight. So it is possible to clip her. She is mortal. So Andrade, I think, has more power than Carolina. So she definitely has the power to put Joanna away. It's just a simple matter of, can she get there? Can she match the speed? Can she get inside to land one of those powerful bombs? And if she can't, can she get to the fight to the ground to neutralize the movement and speed of Joanna? Those are so far no one has been able to do. Do with a lot of success. Claudia had some success in the first couple rounds, but wore out. Joanna is in supreme condition, can go 25 minutes with no problem. With Andrade being a former bantamweight, can she go the 25 minutes? I think that is a question mark. She's never been scheduled for 5 minutes, or for 5 rounds in any weight class, and obviously she cuts a good amount of weight to make this limit here at 115. So this should be interesting. If she's not able to put Joanna away in the first 15 minutes, how will she fare in the last 10? Because we know Joanna has arguably the best conditioning in this division. So that's going to be a question mark. And if Joanna gets past Andrade, she's talked about wanting to fight at 125. The UFC, conflicting reports about whether or not they're opening a flyweight division. It looks like they were, then they weren't. Now it's back on. It possibly a very similar format to season 20 of The Ultimate Fighter, which saw a women's champion get crowned in this very division, the strawweight division. So that could be possibly a chance for Joanna to become a dual champion or a multi-class champion if she beats Andrade. Because I think that's so far, I think this is her toughest fight to date, to be honest. With this type of skill set, Andrade is very scary, and I think this is going to be a fantastic fight. I think we're either going to see the crowning of possibly a new dominant champion, or we're going to see one prove that she's one of the best fighters in the world, male or female, pound for pound, in Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and I'm very excited for this fight as the co-main event. Main event of the evening, Junior Dos Santos against Stipe Miocic for the second time. These two first met in the main event of UFC on Fox a few years ago, and what was a 5-round 4, an amazing fight which saw Dos Santos just edge out Stipe Miocic in December of 2014, and that was the fight to me that really sent Stipe Miocic into the top 10, but into the top 10 meaning for me that he's on the same level of these guys. Dos Santos was at that time just coming off losing a championship fight there against Cain Velasquez. So it was perceived as though Junior would kind of go all over Stipe. Stipe at that time was a good heavyweight, but had lost to Stefan Struve, a few years before. Had beat some good guys, but nobody, had beat Roy Nelson, had beat an aging Gabriel Gonzaga, and obviously beat, a 205-pounder on short notice and Fabio Maldonado. So while he was on a roll, people, and myself included, weren't quite sold on Stipe Miocic, that he could really compete with the elite of the division, which Junior Dos Santos now and at that time was the elite of this division, and just went toe-to-toe with him for 25 minutes in a fight that he nearly won there in Phoenix. And since that point in time, he has been nothing short of fantastic. I mean, he dominated Mark Hunt, knocking him out eventually there in the 5th round, and then put Andrade out in like less than a minute. Then gets the title shot there against Verdum, knocks him out in the 1st round, then defends his title for the first time in his home city of Cleveland, knocks out Alistair Overeem, winning 4 fights in a row, being the first fighter in like over 3 years to actually defend the heavyweight title. And it's ironic because the last time it was defended before Stipe did it against Alistair was when Kane beat Junior Dos Santos at UFC 166. So Dos Santos finds himself fighting for the championship once again, a title that he held and had defended at one point in his career. I think that was back in 2014. No, he won the title in 2011, defended it successfully in 2012 against Frank Mir, and then lost it later that year in 2012 to Cain Velasquez. So it's been a few years, and this is probably the last chance for Dos Santos to capture it. I think if he loses to Stipe here, you obviously still throw in Verdum. Velasquez still very much relevant in the title picture, as well as Alistair Overeem. Guys that have beaten Junior Dos Santos. I think, and this is kind of the last gasp here for Junior if he can't get by Stipe. And I really think the biggest thing in this fight is going to be, the wrestling. I really don't remember Stipe using it all that much in the first fight, and I think at this stage of his career, Junior's not quite as fast with his hands. He's taken some damage before. His chin is not quite what it was. Yeah, and the fact that Stipe, he's the man on the roll. He's the champion. I think right now Stipe is definitely, he's a little younger, he's a little faster, he's a little stronger, but the power JDS still possesses, he can knock anyone out in this division, and, he's gone the 25 minutes, so is Stipe. However, I think we're going to see a finish in this fight. I don't think the fight we saw a little over 2 years ago in Phoenix, I don't think it's going to play out this way. I think it's going to be competitive. I think it will be highly entertaining, much like the last one, but not go 25 minutes. I think we're going to see a finish one way or other in this matchup in Dallas. With that said, let's get to picks here for UFC 211. Krzysztof Jaco against David Branch. I'm going to go David Branch in this one. He's the guy on the roll. And even though it's his re-return to the UFC, it's not quite the UFC debut. I think his skills have tremendously jumped since the last time fans have seen him in the UFC. And despite Krzysztof Jaco's big wins against Talas Leites, I think this time around he's going to have a little tougher time with David Branch, who I think is a little better stand-up fighter. I don't know. Leites has, I think David Branch is, maybe a little more well-rounded than Talas Leites, so I'm going to go with David Branch to win this one. Frankie Edgar against Yair Rodriguez. I really want to pick Yair Rodriguez, but I think Frankie Edgar in a 3-round fight is so hard to beat, and I think the wrestling skills, I'm not sure if Yair is quite there yet, but I'm going to go with Frankie Edgar in this fight. Though I'll be rooting for Yair. He's definitely a fun guy to watch, but I'm going to go with Frankie Edgar. Jorge Masvidal against Damian Maia. I think you just have to pick Damian Maia. No offense to Jorge Masvidal, but right now Damian Maia is on such a good roll. He's performing at such a high level, the best level of his career right now. And I'm not sure if Masvidal is the guy that can derail him at this point in time, so I'm going to go with Damian Maia. Joanna Jacek against Jessica Andrade. I think Andrade has a really good chance to win this fight, but I got to go with Joanna. She's the proven individual. She has the better gas tank. I think she's going to be the faster of the two fighters, and I think her ability to fight from the outside and move in and out quickly is going to be difficult for Andrade to hit and really just keep up with for a full 25 minutes. So I'm going to go with Joanna Jacek to win this one. Stipe Miocic against Junior Dos Santos. A really big fan of both. I really have been a fan of Stipe. Really, after that Junior Dos Santos fight, that's where I really started to respect and follow Stipe, and obviously he has gone on now to win the title and defend the title. And while I'll always be a fan of Junior Dos Santos, one of my favorites for a very long time, right now it's Stipe Miocic. I just think that he's on the roll right now. I think the X factor is his wrestling. I think is a big deal. even though he got knocked out by Stefan Struve, 5 years ago, he's a guy that really hasn't been hit too much. He's a guy that really does a good job of moving and landing a lot of damage, countering, and being able to make his punches land first. So I think this time around in the rematch, I'm going to go with Stipe Miocic to maintain his championship belt. Once again, I am Jim Graham. Thanks to everybody that watched here on Facebook or YouTube or iTunes or wherever the heck you were watching here for this week. And I appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. I'd like to thank my partners, TopRatedMMA.com, MMA UK, MMA Warriors on Facebook, The MMA Community, AJ Hiller, MMA Signatures USA.co, Sports Talk 313. I think that's about it. Again, thanks to everyone following at Twitter or on Twitter at Jim Graham, and subscribe YouTube, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast, and like the page on Facebook, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. So thanks everybody for watching. Until next time, this has been Jim Graham signing off here from Beyond the Cage.